We got another one right there. Look at that.
What's up everybody, Alex Comstock here with WhitetailDNA, and on this week's vlog, I want to cover some major shed hunting mistakes. And on last week's video, I talked about just some major deer hunting mistakes that people commit all the time. And now we're going to start kind of turning the page toward shed hunting with it now being February. I actually just went for my first walk of the year last week, didn't find anything, but going to start walking more and more now. And I was thinking of all these mistakes that, a lot of shed hunters make that I've made countless times. And I want to talk about these shed hunting mistakes and share them with you today. I bet you've committed them, and if you can avoid committing some of these mistakes, you're going to have to find more sheds in the future, and let's just roll right into it. The first mistake that I want to cover is, I think, is probably one of the most widely committed mistakes. It's one that I find myself doing all the time. That's just walking too fast. If you're blazing through the woods, your chances of finding sheds, in my opinion, come down. There's a lot of people that like to walk, as fast as they can, cover as much ground as possible. And, if you've got just a super well-trained eye, or, you might be able to get away with it. But I find that the quicker you walk, the less chance you have at finding antlers. And if you can just really slow yourself down to, just going real nice and slow. I don't usually, when I go for a long walk, for me to cover a lot of ground, it takes a while because I'm usually walking really slow. And I think it's a mistake if you're just blazing through the woods. Your chances of finding sheds are going to go down. Now with that, my mistake number 2 that I want to talk about is not keeping your eyes on the ground. So a lot of times, someone will go out shed hunting. The goal is to go out, hit up a couple spots, find antlers. But then you get out walking, and all of a sudden you're looking up at trees, you're looking up at stand spots, you kind of start turning into almost scouting. If your eyes aren't peeled at the ground, you're going to inevitably miss antlers. The amount of times that I've walked through an area and then come back a second time and found antlers where I know I was right there, and sometimes you just might plain old miss it. If your eyes aren't just peeled at the ground, your chances of finding sheds are going to go way down. And, I just strongly... this is a mistake that I really want to hit home because it happens so often, and it can be hard to realize in real time. I might be out walking and realizing I'm looking up or checking things out, or just really just not paying attention to the ground the whole time. And as soon as that happens, your chances of finding sheds go way down. All right, mistake number 3. These mistakes are kind of just building off each other, but as far as keeping your eyes on the ground, the next mistake is that I feel like people kind of get tunnel vision and they don't scan enough. If you're walking on a deer trail and just keeping your eyes straight down at the deer trail, that's great. If there's an antler there, you should find it. But not only do you want to keep your eyes peeled at the ground, you want to be doing scans, right? Because sometimes, depending on where you're shed hunting, what the terrain's like, if it's deep snow or what have you, deer will, get off the trail to browse, or if it's no snow, especially, or there might be other trails, right, that you're not on, that deer are frequenting. But it's I think in the last few years I've started finding more sheds, and this has been a big reason, is because I've learned to walk slow and then keep my eyes on the ground. And then as I'm keeping my eyes on the ground and walking slow, I'm scanning. So now, because if an antler is going to fall right off the trail that you're walking, you should find it. But you need to be scanning 15, 30 yards, all around you in a little radius, because, there can definitely be antlers out there that you're missing. So if you're not scanning at all, it's a big mistake, and I definitely recommend that. It's definitely something I'd recommend. Make sure you try to practice as much as possible, is keeping not only your eyes on the ground right in front of you, but scanning all over the place. All right, now the 4th mistake that I want to cover is not walking in the right spots. Now this one can mean a variety of things, but the most common is what I see is people like to shed hunt in the areas that they actually hunt in the fall. Now, in a lot of cases, deer aren't actually going to be wintering in these same areas. Things change every year, from food sources to weather conditions. But ultimately, deer, in the winter, they want to be where the best food sources are. And that can change from year to year. And so a lot of times, these food sources aren't necessarily where deer are spending time in the fall. I've I've heard cases and and had friends document cases of bucks traveling 10 miles to a food source in the winter. This has been out, like North Dakota, so more of a plains type state, not necessarily like where I live in northern Minnesota, but deer still will move, I'd say, miles to the best food source. And it might only be half a mile, or it might not be anything at all. So with that, you need to, be up to date on where these deer are spending their time, and that might mean getting out, driving around. It might mean running trail cameras. Right now I've got a whole bunch of trail cameras out, just monitoring deer and where they're spending their time, because in order to find a deer's antler, you need to be where they are in January, February, and March. Deer aren't shedding any other time, really. A few might shed early in December, a few might shed late in April, and those are such small cases. The majority of your deer are going to shed in January, February, and March. So I would, recommend knowing where the deer are spending their time in those months, and if you can figure that out and get on those properties where they are, your odds of finding sheds are going to go way up. Fifth mistake that I want to cover is just not walking enough. So, a lot of times, and this can be a product of social media, it can be a product of just talking with friends, but you see people finding antlers and you're like, how are they finding so many sheds? I haven't found any. Well, odds are they're walking a lot. For me, I think last year I walked, I was a pretty bad ratio. I don't think I found a shed about every 10 miles I walked. So not good, but in order to find a bunch of antlers, you need to cover a lot of ground. I'm not walking superb ground. There are others that will have much better ratios, but still, even the guys that are finding a boatload of sheds in Iowa or Kansas or these, a lot of these really good states, they're still putting in the time to find antlers. Not very often are you just going to go for a walk in the woods, walk half a mile, and come back with a handful of antlers, unless you just hit the absolute gold mine, right? So make sure you walk a lot if you really, really want to find antlers. Otherwise, the less you walk, the less you're going to find, and you're going to have to be all right with that. All right, the sixth mistake that I want to cover is only looking for full antlers. Now, this is something that happens a lot with beginners. Once you start shed hunting and actually finding antlers, you're going to get much better at this, but if you're just looking for a full antler laying tines up in the middle of the trail, you're going to miss a lot of sheds. You need to train your eye to be looking for a curvature of a main beam, for around like a base, for a little piece of a tine, for the color of an antler, for the texture of an antler, for it to, if you've got an antler sitting next to a bunch of branches, to be able to distinguish antler from not an antler, right? And so the more sheds you find, the more experience you have, the better you're going to get at this inevitably, but you need to kind of train your eye to find sheds. And just looking for full big 5-point sides laying tines up you're gonna miss so many antlers. You're just gonna scan right over them. So the better that you can train your eye at finding little parts of an antler, the more sheds you're gonna end up finding, and this can have a huge impact on your shed hunting success. All right, mistake number 7 is gonna be not using optics. I find binoculars to be such a great tool when it comes to shed hunting, and if you're not using them, that's a big mistake. I've got buddies that I shed hunt with that still don't ever bring binoculars out. Not going to name names, but you know who I'm talking about. But anyway, binoculars are huge. The amount of times where I'm walking, I see something, and I'm on a great trail, or I don't want to move, so I just, boom, toss up the binos. It's not a shed, keep going. Or, you see a ridge side with, it's just pounded, maybe it's a south-facing slope. You can tell there's a bunch of beds. It's 50, 60, 80 yards away, I don't know. You throw up the binoculars, you do a scan, boom, you find an antler. Now you can go over there and get it. I use binoculars all the time. If a deer jumps up and you jump a deer, get the binos on it and see if it's a shed buck, see if it's a buck holding antlers. All these things that you can gather from using binoculars, I find very important, and it's helped with my shed hunting success tremendously. All right, so the last mistake that I want to cover, I want to say is more up to you, but it's something that I've definitely seen hinder people, and that's just telling everyone where you're finding sheds, right? If you are finding a bunch of antlers and people are asking, you go, oh yeah, I'm finding them at X, Y, and Z spot, and all of a sudden now there's a bunch of boot tracks in there. Wonder why, right? So I try to keep it as discretionary as possible. I'll tell my good buddies, stuff like that, obviously. It's kind of the same as deer hunting. You don't really want to just broadcast your good spots, right? So keep keep it to yourself where you're finding your antlers, if that's something you care about, and if you want to keep finding more. You know, I've got a few spots where it's like every year, you know, there's going to be sheds there. It's a gold mine every single year. And I've had spots, especially out in North Dakota, be ruined, and not because I told people, but the spots were discovered, and now there's a bunch of shed hunting pressure there, and it's much more difficult to find antlers. If you can find spots that aren't pressured and that are just like go-to late season wintering food sources, it could be a good spot not just this year, but for years to come. So those are my major shed hunting mistakes that I wanted to cover in today's video. I hope you learned a little bit. You know, if you did, if you learned anything, I'd love for you to leave a comment down below. If you got any other big mistakes that you think people make, comment down below. We'd love to start a discussion. Yeah, I appreciate you watching. If you do me a huge favor, hit that like and subscribe button. That means the world to me. You know, we're going to continue with our weekly videos here in the off season. We'll have another shed hunting video coming next week. I'm hopefully going to be trying to get out here every few days to, you know, every week for sure. Spending some time out in the woods walking. Hopefully I can start finding some antlers. We'll bring that here to you. So once again, I appreciate you watching. We'll see you here on the next video.